The wild ride of childhood is felt differently by parents trying to make ends meet.
I've just been running from supermarket to supermarket, trying to find, the best deals and trying to save money, trying to find secondhand items for the kids.
Tia is a working mother of 3, hit by the current policy that caps child benefits to 2 children.
My salary is £43,000 a year, which I thought was a good salary, but in the past couple of years, my rent went from $1,200 a month to $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. And it's sad that I have to rely on universal credit, and it's definitely not my plan to rely on it forever. But if it's not enough to catch you, then the safety net isn't going to work.
Tia wants that safety net to be expanded and is calling for the government to remove the cap. But this was the Chancellor's response today.
It costs more than £3 billion a year. And we were really clear during the election that we were not going to make spending commitments without being able to say where the money was going to come from. And if I said to you now, we're going to make those changes this year or next year or the year after, you would rightly say, where's the money going to come from that?
Yet there may be the money to fund a pay rise for public sector workers.
At the moment, we are looking at those pay review body recommendations, doing the analysis. We will work with public sector workers on that. And later this month, we will make announcements around public sector pay when we do that full analysis.
Labour have inherited multiple pay disputes across the public sector. Resolving them will not be cheap, yet neither is the alternative.
We've seen pay in real terms for teachers seriously cut, and we've seen a recruitment and retention crisis where pay is a key factor leading to fewer graduates choosing teaching and more teachers leaving the profession prematurely.
The review for almost 2 million NHS workers and teachers could see a pay increase of up to 5.5%. That would cost over £3 billion. That is a similar cost to removing the child benefit cap, which would lift 300,000 children out of poverty overnight, and is a growing area of dissent amongst Labour MPs.
Rosie Duffield MP recently called it out as an attack on women's rights, and it is, because you're saying that unless you can afford these children and know that you can afford them for eternity, people die, people's relationships break down, people lose jobs.
These are children in need of a safety net. The child cap will be an area of sensitivity for the government, who say they want to fight child poverty whilst being strict on spending.
Well, I'm now joined by the Labour MP, Meg Hillier, who's previously been chair of the Public Accounts Committee. Meg Hillier, would Rachel Reeves be right to implement the full 5.5% pay rise that's apparently been recommended by the independent pay review body, despite the fact that it would cost up to £10 billion?
Well, this is an example of the very many difficult choices she faces. I mean, she's in a very tricky hot seat now, having to make those judgments with colleagues across government. And, let's be clear, the reason that this is so-called above inflation is it actually reflects, of course, the inflation under Liz Truss, and that's why the pay review body has come up with what is currently higher than inflation. So it's another problem left by the Tories.
OK, put the blame on the Tories. I knew you would. But despite that, you've got to find the money. So when you look at all the things she's ruled out in terms of various taxes that she won't raise, she doesn't want to raise borrowing to fund this, it leaves wealth taxes, for example, hiking capital gains tax. Given the state of the finances, would you back that kind of move?
Look, I'm not going to randomly back an individual tax policy here today in the studio, because what Rachel Reeves is doing, quite rightly, is going through the books in detail with the Treasury. And what's clear, the King's Speech has laid out our legislative programme that is costed. But she will be doing a budget in, we think, the autumn, and then a spending review. And those are the two places where we'll see more detail on what of these difficult choices will be made. And of course, we've got various reviews going on in government to look in detail at some of those things. And remember, in opposition, you just don't have the same resources. Now, all of Whitehall is at the Chancellor's and the government's disposal to help make the decisions.
But she's lifted the lid on that whole process today. There's a clear hint that there will be inflation-busting pay rises for teachers and other public sector workers. You presumably endorse that. And all I'm saying is there aren't that many options to pay for it. So the least worst option could be to raise wealth taxes.
Well, there's a whole suite of taxes that could be looked at, but she's been very clear, and we've been very clear as a party through the election what we won't raise. She will obviously be looking at things long term or medium to long term. We want to see the growth that we need, but there will also be decisions, and to be made in individual departments, and those secretaries of state are already looking through the books. And
so you think spending cuts to fund some of these?
Well, they will have to. They will be looking through everything that a department is doing and just making judgments about what's most important, about maybe rephasing things. And I looked on the Public Accounts Committee repeatedly at many cheap promises that were made and then not delivered. And it's really important that they are thought through and sustainable. One of the key things here is that any decision that's made needs to be something that the British public, businesses, others need to know will be, for the Parliament at least, and that there is certainty about that direction of travel.
You talk about rephasing. I mean, that's code for spending cuts in the education department to fund teachers' pay rises.
Well, you're putting words into my mouth.
Departmental rephasing, you said. I'm just wondering, if you end up doing that, what's the difference between you and the Tories?
No, let's be clear. I was not suggesting for a moment that there would be cuts in the education department to pay for this. What I'm saying is across Whitehall, in a spending review, every department, and I've looked at these a lot over the years, I was chair for 9 years, on the committee for 13, each department has to bid in on what it's going to do and prove to the Treasury that it's going to do a good job of delivering that. And then there will be decisions made about how that is prioritised, and that is a completely normal approach. But what we're going to be focusing on is tackling child poverty, dealing with the issues around pay and work, which are clear priorities for us as a government.
Let's come to child poverty, because there was a hint on public sector pay rises. There was no such hint on ending the two-child benefit cap. Your colleague Rosie Duffield calls it heinous, sinister and overtly sexist. How would you describe it?
Well, look, I have been on the record saying that I want to see the 4 out of 10 children here in my constituency living in poverty lifted out of poverty. And this is one way that could be done quite quickly. But if you look at child benefit and how it's been changed over the years, remember, not that long ago, it was a universal benefit. Then the pay cap was brought in, but very unfairly, so that people with the same household income, some got it and some didn't. And then the 2-child limit was brought in, which I didn't agree with. But even then, there was some very unfortunate approaches that sort of the extensions that could be given, but very humiliating for particularly the women.
Like
in that
the
rape clause, exactly, completely. If you're having to have workarounds like that, you can tell the policy's not working. So that needs to be looked at in the round. You can't. I'm very clear that you can't just pick one element and change it. And what I'm really heartened by is this review of child poverty, led by 2 excellent secretaries of state at DWP and Education, who both have a very strong mission. And the clear thing there is that they're leading it through their departments. It's not something being outsourced to another body that will take 2 years to present. They are in the moment making recommendations.
Are you clear that that 2-child benefit cap should not be intact, that Rachel Reeves will do everything she can to ditch it in the budget, for example?
Well, I'll be one of the people lobbying when this child poverty review comes up to look at that very closely, because it's a quick way of getting a lot of my constituents, the children who are my constituents, out of poverty. But I also want to
the King's Speech, as other
the King's Speech is not the place to do this. We've laid out 40 bills in the King's Speech. This is something for down the line. But also, I'm really clear about the other things that are taking place: the breakfast clubs, the changes to school uniform policy, the changes to work and pay. These are all things that also can help lift children out of poverty. So
you'll bide your time, but it's got to go.
I'm biding time, and I'm very confident in the 2 secretaries of state who are leading this review, their capability and their willingness to really embrace this issue and tackle child poverty. We took out 500,000 children out of child poverty when we were last in government. It's gone up by 700,000 under the Tories.